Hey, what's going on? One and all. Hope all is well out there this evening. Keola Maltengan here. Just hopping on for a little storytelling with intuitive investigations. Make sure that that is off. Yeah, hope all is going well out there. I have been busy with some things, some family things going on, yet the call of the wizard has been strong. And so I figured that I would hop on and share some things on my storytelling. And in fact, you know what? I am feeling a little parched. So before I get started, I'm going to grab some water and I'll be right back. And I am back. All right. So last week I was talking about Bigfoot on Maui. I'll get back to that. I got some shit going on right now. So I figured I'd use this as a teaching opportunity because things are a little wild right now. We're in this process of a collective awakening. And while that ultimately is to the benefit of, well, that's a loaded statement. Ultimately, it can be to the benefit of humanity. There's a lot more to it than that. And so I want to share some things that are happening now, how to put things into context, because we, as far as Bigfoot on Maui is at, being out there, this goes even a little further. And so, yeah, so one of the ways that I feel you can tell that you're in the midst of some things are probability shifts. Let me explain. Probability shifts are when things go awry, when things typically go in one way. You could be making breakfast in the morning and say you have done this 1,000 times and you walk past this one area where it just happens to have a pot or a glass or something, and you unexpectedly hit or knock it. That, that can just happen. Now, say later that day, the same drive that you make pretty much every day, you take that telltale left and almost run into a car that's turning right. Okay, so things can happen, full moons can cause shifts to occur. And let's say that through the course of your day, something happens and something happens and something happens. And often we like to just explain that away or ask the question, what the hell is going on? What's going on today? And I'll say that happens over the course of many consecutive days. Well, when we start to talk about probability shifts, what we're really talking about is an entanglement with an entity and an entrainment with said entity. And so lots of ease in that statement, which is funny because it does not create any sort of ease at all. Didn't. In any case, when we start to see a pattern emerge, when we start to experience a consistency in occurrence, particularly one that's less favorable for us, then at least my interpretation of that is that there's something that's skewing probability, which often leads to screwing our day. And so I've had a little bit of that this past few days. And so I want to speak to that because it's often a telltale in terms of something larger happening. These aren't just a series of misfortune that's occurring. This isn't just a happening of bad luck. And indeed, when we look at that in terms of the entanglement, and entanglement is just a connection that allows two beings to be in a relationship of some sort. And the entrainment, or the matching of frequency, right, that then begins to come into play, then can allow a certain degree of influence in a person's life. Now, typically, some of the work that I do is a little interesting. That's where this whole intuitive investigation comes from. The storytelling of the experiences with the Sasquatch in the mountains of Makawao just begins to scratch the surface of some of the things that I have chosen, because I'm choosing in on it, to engage with. And so part of what I do nowadays is to hold the grids here on Maui, and that's a whole conversation in and of itself, to confront beings and entities. When something goes bump in the night, I am one of the persons that's able and capable of bumping back, and ultimately looking to safeguard human consciousness. Well, liberate human consciousness. Yet for the time being, there's some things happening. Actually, a lot of wild things happening in the dreamscape right now. And so in the past week, well, about a week and a half ago, I began to work with something that was coming in. And when I say coming in, this is a being or an entity that exists outside the parameters of our reality or time sphere matrix. And now for something to come in, it needs to be let in. So a person, a practitioner, a human being that exists is letting something in. So this came to my attention maybe 3 weeks ago. And so the feeling that I had 3 weeks ago was, a week and a half, 2 weeks, something's going to happen. I'm going to get myself ready for that. And so often I'll have a sense around that time frame, week and a half, 2 weeks out, that something's coming. Dramatic sip of water. And so with that, then there's a lot of work to be done with that. These are higher dimensional beings. And so it's like if a sumo wrestler decided to wrestle an ant. One, the ant has no context for sumo wrestling, let alone the fact that this being even exists, right? If you kind of think of that to scale, the movement of something so large can be mind-blowing for something so small. And often that's the case when we start to talk about these interdimensional or higher dimensional beings. They operate at a frequency band well beyond anything that we in our reality are able to necessarily comprehend. So I don't necessarily, as the ant in this case, need to challenge the sumo wrestler. However, I am able to make a long distance call to part of my own intelligence higher up in that same arena or higher, to be able to work with, kind of blocking or staving off whatever that is. My part is finding who the hell is letting this stuff in, right? It's like leaving a door open in a house when it is termite or mosquito season. All of a sudden, there is just a whole swarm of these things that can come in. And so my part is to find who's letting it in and to effectively neutralize them in some way, shape, or form. Now, I've been kind of slacking on my duties. Not to say that I haven't been taking it seriously. However, this also has been a busy time just as a human being. School's about to start. Things are kind of uncertain with finance, yada, yada, yada. And I've realized that I haven't necessarily fully taken on this mantle, if you will. And so with this full moon, with this now in our full flows of our genius, with things happening around my family and house, it is and really behooves me to really start taking this shit seriously. And so I am. And part of that is to talk about it because, for a while, I mean, if me 10 years ago heard me now talking, I'd probably make some kind of sarcastic comment about tinfoil hats. And I would have felt pretty self-righteous about it. So I want to talk about these kinds of things because things are happening. I've had in the last week alone, 3 people reach out about things that are happening, events of high strangeness that's going well beyond what someone can explain. And so that's kind of my jam. Areas of uncertainty and just way out in the woo and the weird. Yeah, that's when you want a wizard. So I want to talk about this because this is happening. Last week with the announcement that, oh yes, aliens are real, or what was the phrase? Biologicals, I think, with the Senate hearings about, alien life forms, which honestly I didn't anticipate for another couple of years. It's significant, which will probably just be another show. It's significant. In any case, since then, especially, there's been a rise in things. And so with the shifts in probability, and that's one of the things, intuitively, we can kind of feel it. We know something is off. We can sense the energy. It doesn't feel good necessarily when we're starting to deal with entities, attachments, or interdimensional beings. And so when that happens, we can have a sense of it. That's sort of the first line of defense, is our own intuition. And sometimes our instincts can kick in. Difference between, I would say, intuition, intelligence, and instincts is the aspect of where we're actually perceiving that, right? Instincts is very much tied into our brain stems, or the reptilian brain, our amygdala, our midbrain, that mammalian brain, which is very reactive, can sense things, right? And this is largely what ties to our subconscious mind. When we're talking about intelligence, then, that's more prefrontal cortex, some of our higher faculties. Intuition, that can be all over the place. It can be our central nervous system. That can be our body awareness and proprioception. That can be our gut, the enteric nervous system. It can be our heart and sort of this magnetic resonant frequency that comes into play. Any case, we sense it, whether we identify it as instinct, whether we are able to intuit it, we have a sense of it. And so that sense, at least for me, is just a deep knowing, claircognizance, if you will. It's just a knowing that I have. Something's coming. And it's usually that simple. Something's coming. And so I'll take time then to further that experience, go into wizard mode, which is a trance state that I go into. And then I kind of take a look. I go out and I explore and I see and I sense the very edges, if you will, of reality. And then when I am able to perceive something, then I'll come back into, physical form, and then I'll do a card reading. I've got cards all over the place. And then I'll do a card reading, and then I'll see, per a very specific question about this. And then from there, I'll also, if I haven't yet, then use muscle testing as well. And that's a way that I can use my own kinesthetic awareness to figure out if something is true or untrue, real or unreal, or not real. Now, if it goes all the way through those three areas, this is sort of my own process of levels of discernment, then I'll start to take it seriously. If it fails at any one of those three, then I'll kind of back off and then just sort of give it time and space. Or I'll ask another intuitive. The thing about interdimensional beings is it operates outside of where normal intuition is able to perceive. Normal intuition operates within, usually at best, third dimensional information, though when we are perceiving, we are able to see a dimension beneath where we're perceiving from. Our mental body is our third dimension. Usually we're perceiving our physicality, which is a 2D or second dimensional experience. Anywho, kind of a tangent. Back then, if it goes to those three areas, then I remain keenly aware of things. And I begin to observe the world around me, specifically me, and then also just at large. We'll start to see things, not just probability shifts within myself, at large. 2019 was a very interesting year. This is when I first became really aware of interdimensional beings and the fact that this was a whole thing. In fact, at that point, I gave all of that, kind of just dismissed it. I was a big occult guy in my own spiritual experience and path. I was looking at like occultism and esoteric information and shamanism and all of these things. And so I didn't put a whole lot in terms of the concepts of, star seeds or different types of beings. And then I had a few experiences, 3 to be exact, which dramatically and drastically altered my worldview. It was my initiation, if you will, into this world, which I'll talk about in a whole nother show and series, because that deserves some attention as well. In any case, this past weekend I went away, and largely in my own house, I've done some things in terms of protection, taking it to a point of having multiple layers of protection. And when out of the house, it's less, the integrity of that field is less sound. It's something that's more continuous. And so leaving the house for the weekend, went and did a little traveling with the boys, and some interesting things began to happen. And as it did, and it has been somewhat ongoing, however, definitely being out of the house and out of the sphere and field of integrity definitely allowed, to a certain degree, access. And so some things happen. Now, as a dad, anything that happens related to the children gets a very reactive and emotional response. And I found that when I really have started to do my work, inevitably something happens. And that something that happens is usually related to my family. And that when it happens, the energy that I've been accruing or building or intending to direct towards this level of work, all of a sudden it's like a big ball of energy, and then all of a sudden it kind of just like flops down like pasta noodles, like spaghetti, just bloop. And so I had an experience like that this past weekend, past couple of days. Now being back home is helpful, yet also acknowledging that there's more that I can be doing and have committed to doing. Now, with all of this, there are absolutely beings beyond what we can perceive. There is truly more beyond the edges of what it is we believe. And when we are really committed to seeing beyond what is presented to us, there can be some kickback. And the thing about it is that we're going through this now mass awakening, right? It is a process where this latent aspect of our intuitive talents, a whole nother level of how we can perceive reality. Again, well beyond most things that we can believe, is now active. And because of that, we're having these spontaneous occurrences of intuition, of deep, direct knowing, of seeing, sometimes hearing things. It is a time of high strangeness and uncertainty, and one that certain intelligences are leveraging. And so I say this not to freak anybody out, yet knowledge is power. And the more that we know, the greater capacity we have to grow, to expand beyond the boundaries of what we've been told, to move into areas that have been taboo, to open doors of deep knowledge and wisdom, and to be more connected and aligned both individually and collectively. And so when it comes to this, then, whether you're just intuiting that something is happening, someone is there, whether you are observing the shifts in probability around you, small nudge with your elbow, a seemingly random accident that happens, know that it works in both ways. That these events that can spell for many, misfortune, that there are the opposite effects as well in terms of synchronicities. And that the more that we're able to rather respond in fear, and honestly, to a certain degree, equal mix of curiosity and humor, the better equipped we'll be to move through all this. And that each and every one of us are powerful beyond measure, that we have a capacity, an energy, a vital force and spark that differentiates us from a number of other beings that exist within the realm of what we know and that which is yet to be known. And indeed, if it weren't for this capacity and privilege that we carry with us as human beings, as celestial human beings, then we would largely not be having these kinds of experiences to begin with. So I'm going to be posting more on this because, man, the floodgates are open. And so one thing to close out today and this episode, if that is what this is to reaffirm our own autonomy, to every day, whether it's quietly within inside of yourself or out loud in the mirror, to express your commitment as a sovereign being who chooses into a place of personal connectivity and alignment and reaffirming this, the true power that each and every one of us have, which is our choice. Now, I will link in the comments a statement that I utilize daily, and perhaps that's something that can be of usage to you. Change it in a way that feels right. The statement that I use has been muscle tested and presented by a medical intuitive as a resource passed down to me by one of my mentors. And so I find it to be something that's incredibly powerful and useful and has a high utility in that it's something that I can just tuck in my pocket and take with me wherever I go. For now, though, I feel like that's a lot. So I'm just going to end here. That's it for now. Love and aloha. Take care. And ahui ho.